another option. Here's a graph, again, that causes some concern sometimes. Sometimes these graphs are labeled a little bit different. Here's some more mass spectroscopy data. Looks real similar, but again, here's what bothers people. And I get it. Actually, this is kind of similar to the way that these graphs have shown up on the AP test in the last year or so. They list this as mass percent. And so here's like percentages. But then what bothers people is that they'll say, wait a second. So this sample has 100% of the isotopes with a mass of 35. Well, how can you have 100% plus 32%? Like, shouldn't these percentages all add up to 100? The AP test has been using graphs like this recently, and what they're doing is taking the most abundant isotope and setting it at 100. And then the other ones are all kind of relative. So when I look at some of these questions, what element is represented by this data? By far the most abundant isotope has a mass of 35 AMUs. So if I look at the periodic table, I'm going to look for the element whose molecular mass is, or I should say atomic mass in this case, is closest to 35, which gives me, without a doubt, chlorine. There's nobody else that's closest to 35 besides chlorine. There we go. And so here's what I'm going to do with the second one. What percent of atoms have a mass of 35 AMU? Which I get it. These graphs are kind of written and labeled goofy. Because the most common wrong answer is people say, well, 100%. That's what it says right here. 100% of the isotopes are mass 35. But what about that other 32% that are mass 37? Think about this as maybe like a sample of atoms. So maybe I have 100 atoms that are mass 35, and I have about 100 atoms that are mass 32. So I might say something like 100 atoms out of 132 total. So I'm looking at this data a little bit different. Instead of thinking of it as percentages, I'm going to think of it as just a sample size. I got 100 atoms that are mass 35, and then I got 32 atoms that showed up with mass 37. So I can kind of think of it as a percentage this way. And if I plug that into my calculator, 100 out of 132, I'm looking at about 75-ish percent. 75.78. Actually, let's just keep it all in whole numbers. Let's say about 76. 76%. So be aware, you'll see one of these on the practice test. I think there's even one on the real test. I wanted to make sure that we hit one of these. This is kind of the way that the AP test has been showing this mass spectroscopy data. A little goofy, but manageable. You're all above average intelligence. I know you can handle these.